Hello, everybody. In today's episode, we're covering annual planning. You'll learn when to focus on it depending on your company's current stage, what the key ingredients are and how to sequence them, and why mastering it is crucial to long-term success. Thank you and enjoy. Today we're doing annual planning.
Yeah.
Right, we're getting into that time of year where this is a big thing, an important thing.
Yes.
Right, planning for things, even though we know that the plans aren't probably going to be perfect.
Right.
And things aren't going to go according to plan.
Yeah.
But that's not a reason to not plan.
No.
So, I know you have a lot of thoughts here.
Of course I do.
So I'll let you kick it off.
I always like to go context, right? So let's talk about stages of development, right? So annual planning does not make sense for stage one company. I could argue that an annual planning is not necessary, not required for a stage two company, right? When you get to stage 3 or 4 or 5, you have to annually plan. It is a core competency. Now, you could avoid doing it, but you're just going to have a hell of a mess.
You can avoid a lot of things.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean it's a good thing to do.
Exactly. So it really has to do with stages number 1, so we need everybody to appreciate that. Stage 1, obviously, is product market fit, 0 to 3 months. Stage 2, 3 months to 1 year. So you can see why you don't necessarily need it. But when you're into stage 3, where you should be thinking and planning out 1 to 2 years, then all of a sudden you can see, well, annual planning becomes really important, right? In stage 2, now our version of annual planning puts you into stage 5, right? Because stage 1 is 0 to 3 months, stage 2 is 3 months to 1 year, stage 3 is 1 to 2, stage 4 is 2 to 5, right? And stage 5 is 5 to 10. And so we believe that every single year we practice that we should update our 3-year goals, our 1-year goals, and then of course have 90-day goals, which we call rocks, that help us achieve our 1-year goals. So if it's the beginning of the year and we're doing annual planning, we will have new 3-year, new 1 year, and new 90 days. And then that 1 year and that 3-year does not change during the year. That is a discipline. So if you're committed to having a really strong 3-year and a really strong 1 year, right, then you can really focus during the year on quarter 1 rocks, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Now, the reality is that every now and then you get into the year in the first quarter, and you may want to change a little bit of your annual goals, right? But one of the ways you know you're a pretty damn good leadership team is if you don't change your annual goals and you deliver on them consistently. Every single year, you hit plus or minus, 80 to 90% of your annual goals.
And in that sense, it's really just a discipline. There's a bunch of shiny objects on that path during that year, but you have to stay on the right thing. And then when we get to the end of the year, right, we can review and adjust the big picture. But it's like we're not going to be doing this every single day.
Yeah. And so, it gets down. So if you buy into this context, and by the way, we're pretty, we're not. These aren't theories. These are things that we know. These are things I know having invested in 100 companies. These are things I know having coached 100 plus leadership teams, right? If you buy into this, right, then it's really about whether it's the founder, the CEO, the visionary, who's ever the grand poobah, right?
It's a word.
That's a word. Yeah. Ultimately, you're really, you're doing a decent job as a leader if the leadership skills and disciplines that you have are appropriate for the stage of development that you're in, right? So if you've gotten to the place where you're a stage 3 company or a 4 company or a 5 company, annual planning is it's a core discipline. There's not even a debate around this.
Well, if you don't make it a discipline, then you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's just a question of, as an example, if you're a founder, a CEO, or a visionary, and you don't buy into annual planning, right? Then what I can tell you is you are going to suffer so much more frustration and dissonance and grinding than you would have if you just got your act together in terms of having a big picture vision that everybody's aligned around, including your compelling, audacious goals. 10 years out is typical. And then, work your 3-year, work your 1 year. Every single year you update it and just march, right? It's the difference between scalers and scalars, I always say, right? Just get aligned, get everybody aligned, and march.
90 days at a time.
90 days at a time. Well done.
Yes, there's a reason for that number. And yeah, whatever. So working through the stages.
Yeah.
At what stage does this need to be a core discipline?
Well, like I said earlier, it needs to start turning into a core discipline during stage 3. It doesn't have to be there in stage 4 and stage 5, but once again, you're just wasting so much effort and energy if you're not doing it in stage 4s and stage 5s.
I guess I don't think you're gonna get to stage 5 if you're not annual planning. And I also think there's a value in annual planning on the personal level.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's something we can go off on that. But basically, it's just if you want to really maximize your growth and your direction, whether it's you as a person or a company of 1,000 people,
yeah,
it's a essential component. Reviewing the lessons of the past year.
Yes.
Understanding where you are.
Yes.
At that point in time, and then what you need to adjust and look forward to going forward.
Comment I would make is on the word choices just now, right? So once you get to stage 4 and 5, and even in 3, it's no longer about you.
Yeah.
Right? It's about everybody in the organization being focused, aligned, and thriving, right? So we owe it to our company, and we owe it to our senior leadership team, right? To all work together to get on the same page in terms of where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get from here to there.
Would you say it starts at the right? I think that there's a little bit of a cascade there.
Yeah.
And right, the leaders need to understand this thoroughly, and then the benefits of that ripple throughout the company.
Yes. Yeah.
So right. So going back, it's not about you. Well, ideally, even if you're doing it on the personal level, it's not about you. It's about your role within the system at large.
Yes.
Right. Because if you are a more clear-headed leader, then you are better able to help your team. So I don't want to just go off on that tangent.
Yeah.
But it was just something I was thinking about, because I feel like we're getting to that point. And I think Chris Williamson has a good annual review template somewhere, which is just a side note.
Will we post that as a link?
If I can find it.
Okay.
Sure. So on the stages front, right, you're getting into stage 3 now.
Yes.
What is that annual planning process system? What does that look like?
By the time we get into stage 3, obviously in 4 and 5, we have a leadership team around us, right? What you want to do is get that leadership team together and decide what our priorities are going to be. Once again, really, it's stage 4 I'm more comfortable like leaning into, because in stage 3 you're just at that 1 to 2 years. And so in theory, right, it's just an annual plan. You just need to work on your 1-year goals in stage 3 and your 90-day, right? We obviously are trying to help people get to stage 5, right? Stage 4 is where I've got, you've got the leader and you've got departments, right? And you are working on a 3-year, and you're working a new 3-year, so you're updating your 3-year. So obviously this year, our 3-year ended in 26. Next year it's going to end in 27, right? Our 1-year ended in 24. Obviously next year it'll end in 25. So get the senior leadership team together and take a look at everything that you have that makes sure that everybody's on the same page. And we like to have, in our system, we have a vision page, and then we have a goal page, right? In EOS, they have the Vision Traction Organizer, right? Which is similar to ours, but different in structure, but it has the same thing, right? Make sure the vision stuff still makes sense, and then work on your goals. So in the annual planning process, we get our team together, make sure the vision stuff still makes sense. In particular, the forever agreements, right? Do our core values still resonate? Are the words working super well for us? We tweaked our words again, just this last quarter, just a little bit, right? But
we're going into a process of refining them too, based on the feedback, based on what we've seen throughout the organization, and what we know about the psychological implications of those words.
Yeah. So every single year, right? And we do it. I do it every single quarter with my clients, and we do it as a company, right? We check in on the forever agreements. Are they still as perfectly worded as possible? So check in on those forever agreements. Make sure they're perfectly worded. Vision. Your core values, your compelling value proposition, the definition of your ICP, and the definition of your compelling why. So check in on those things. Then check in on more details around the compelling value proposition and the ICP. Just make sure those definitions are strong and they still make sense. And usually there's a little tweaking that comes in, and then get those things, make sure those things are in good place. Then you go in and update your 3-year goals. And there's a big conversation around that. And by the way, you look at your compelling and audacious long-term goals, right? Do those still make sense? So I forgot to mention that. So do those still make sense? Do we want to tweak them at all? If they still make sense, okay, so we're 1 year closer to those. What do we need to be working on something within the next 3 years to get us closer? So that's a thing, that conversation you have in terms of your 3-year goals. So, and the 3-year goals are not just the revenues and your profit margins or your enterprise value or a couple other specific KPIs that really make sense, right? They're also a list of things that you would love to see materialize within 3 years. For us, it's some new tools that we want to put out into the world. As an example, it's new strategic partners, it's new publications. We have a list of about 15 things, but you want to update that. And a lot of times what will happen is, what we do is we'll have, because we don't do 2-year, we'll have stuff that's for 3 years, and we'll have stuff that's for 2 years, right? That's in there. And so what'll happen is maybe those 2 years turn into 1 year move over to our 1-year goals. And then there's some new stuff that's put in there. And sometimes there's things that we've already achieved that were part of our 3-year goals. And so we just check that off. But the point is, we work on our 3 years and we update them. And then we work on our 1 years. And as we talked about earlier, then we work on our 90-day goals, or our rocks, and make sure we're all on the same page. We also like to do SWOT during our annual process. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And strength and weaknesses are internally looking, and opportunities and threats are externally looking. But we encourage people to at least once a year do a SWOT. And so we'll do that as a part of the process. We will do that as a part of the process before we actually set our 3-year and our new 3-year and our new 1 year, and obviously our new rocks.
So with all those pieces, what is the order of execution of those things, right?
Yeah.
You said SWOT analysis comes before the goals.
So classic meeting structure, forgetting about us for a second, but what we teach, right, is you get together you typically have 2 days for your annual meeting. The first day starts with, okay, so how are we doing, right? Just checking in, personal and professional, the best from the last year. What are the 3 cool things that took place in the last year on the professional side? What's something really cool that took place in the last year on the personal side? Then we like to talk about, what's working and what's not working. And of course we do expectations. And then, the first thing we do is we review how we just did for the quarter. And then we review how we did for the year. And then we grade that. And this is during the first day. And then we like to invest in a lot of different coaching organizations. In their methodologies, they encourage investing in what we call trust builders. So the trust building exercises, there's a lot of different ones out there. But we spend typically 3+ hours in the first day of an annual planning meeting or session. We spend 3 hours doing trust. So, Usually it's a couple different exercises, but at the core, it's all about better understanding one another. It's about building vulnerability. It's about seeing, just really connecting as human beings. I mean, deeply connecting as human beings. I just conducted a session yesterday for one of my clients around trust, in terms of the three dimensions, character, competency, and connection. And we literally sat there and we went through, okay, so character-wise, we're all good. Competency-wise, we're all good. On the connections front, how are we doing? And we had the 12 sort of classic categories that are associated with connections-based trust up on the board. And we went through each person and we talked about where they could be a little bit stronger in terms of each of those 12 dimensions. And it was scary and cool. And we spent probably, an hour and a half doing it. It was a team of 5, but everybody gave it a 10 out of 10. So that's a big part of the first day. And then I like to do the SWOT next. And then if you have time, what we do is we have a thing called key topics. So these are things that we think we need to talk about before we start to work on updating the 3 years and the 1 year and the 90. That ends up being a full day right there. And that's day one. And so, we believe it takes 2 days to do a great annual planning session, but I'll stop there.
Well, then what's day 2? It's like, oh no, screw that. All right, let's talk about the Cubs. Here's a message from our sponsor now. Like, what's day 2?
Hi.
A little fourth wall break there. Huh?
Yeah,
we have one of those.
Day 2. So day 2, we review what we did on day 1. In particular, as an example, was there anything that came out of day 1 that was, worth writing down or after you got done? But by the way, at the end of day 1, I love everybody going out and having a dinner, having a wonderful meal. That's a very important thing for me personally. And I encourage it for all teams, right? Teams you got to love working with one another and going out and having a great meal, and enjoying being with one another is part of that. So you start off day 2, what do you highlights from yesterday, anything important that we should be adding to our issues list to discuss during this day. And then getting into if there are any key topics, maybe you still had some stuff to work on at the end of the day, during day 1, at the end of day 1. And so hit the key topics, but then get into, okay, so let's all get on the same page in terms of updating our 3-year goals. And that's a very collaborative session. And then it's moved to that, okay, now what are our 1-year goals given our 3-year goals? Once again, a very collaborative session. I like to have 1-year goals of less than 7 or less. The more goals you have, the less likely it is you're going to hit them all.
The less focused you're going to be able to be on any given goal.
Yeah. And so get everybody aligned around that. What I find is that personally, and we do this in the software give people the ability to do this in the software, but when you have your 3-year goals and your 1-year goals, you have a title of the goal, to launch XYZ as an example, but then in the descriptions, I like to open it up and get into the descriptions and make bloody sure we're all on the same page, that we know what we're talking about. Because I can't tell you how many times over the years where people like, I don't remember, how do we know we hit it? Right? What is the, make it smart, right? What specifically has to happen? And the more notes, the better, because the reality is everybody forgets this shit.
Especially when you have a year between reviews.
Yeah. Everybody forgets it. Right. And so I can't tell you, I mean, just yesterday, like I said, I had a client session and we went into the goals, and 3 year, we went into a couple 3 years. We went into a lot of 1 years. And we opened it up because we had to remember what the heck we all agreed to. So get really specific on your 1-year goals, on your 3-year goals. What does it mean, right? Okay, so we got this description. What does it mean to have achieved it? Do the same thing on your 1-year goals. Make sure that if we hit these 1-year goals, we feel as a team we're on track to hit our 3-year goals. And of course, our 3-year goals, when we're reviewing those, we say, okay, are we on track to hit our compelling, audacious goals? So for us, for like 2030, all right, is this going to help us feel like we are still on track for hitting our 2030 goals if we achieve these 2027 goals, and then which are our 3 years that we'll have next year, and then once we get done with the 1-year goals, okay, are we now going to be on track to hit our 3-year goals? And then you go into the 90-day rocks and goals, right? And say, okay, so what do we got to do this quarter, this next 90 days, in order to feel like we are absolutely on track to hit our goals for the year?
So is that day 2?
No. So we've gone through all of that, and now we'll still have a bunch of issues. And so, we'll have this list of issues left, and then we'll go through those issues, right? And then that will be there's a conclude, obviously, at the end of day 2.
And the significance of the conclude is?
The significance of the conclude is when you checked in, you had these expectations. Did we meet our expectations? Do we feel like the time together was super productive? Do we feel like we achieved everything we wanted to achieve? Do we feel like the conversations that we had were healthy? Do we feel like the meeting was both efficient and effective? And if the answer is we met all of our collective expectations, the meeting was efficient and effective, it deserves a 10, right? So we say on a scale of 1 to 10, how did we do? So I tend to have my concludes with, all right, so how are you feeling? Where's your head? Did we meet the expectations for the 2 days? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how did we do? And if it's less than a 9, you need to help us understand what we could have done better as a learning organization.
Yeah, it's important to have that review, especially with so many moving pieces across those 2 days.
Yeah.
Do you think, it seems like day 1 is basically establishing and refreshing the context of the whole session?
Yes.
And greasing the wheels that on day 2, you are primed to execute on those plans. Do you think there is value in splitting those up into 2 different days, right? Having everything basically teed up on day 1 and then having a nice meal, nice communal thing, right? I think eating together is one of those primal bonding experiences.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah.
And then sleeping on that.
Yeah.
And then going into day 2 with all of that sort of sorted in your subconscious.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you say all of that, it's sort of the forever agreements, it's the compelling, audacious goals. It's the SWOT to help us. And I didn't go into SWOT as much as I should have, right? Given what we're talking about right now. So when we get done with the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, like you said, internally focused, opportunities and threat, externally focused, we review them all, and we decide on a case by case as we literally go down. Let's say I have seven in each of those 4 boxes, right? Go through every single one of them and say, okay, is there an issue here that we need to think about addressing within the next year? And by the way, strengths, as an example, you may say, well, why are you looking at strengths? Well, it's like, no, because either maybe there's an issue where we're going to start to have that strength lessen, or we know, given everything that's going on in the world, we got to get even stronger at this, right?
You lean in, and you don't want your strengths to atrophy, but then there are some that you have to exploit.
Yes. Yeah. Whole anti-fragile conversation, right? But yeah, so you go through all the strengths, go one by one, right? Is there something here that we need to be thinking about over the next year? And if it is, you put it on your long-term issues list. It may end up being a thing that you turn into a 1-year goal. It may be something you turn into a rock, right? Something you're going to focus on over the next 90 days. Or it could be something that you're going to focus on in Q2 or Q3 or Q4 of the next year.
When you add it to the long-term issue list, are you adding it as an issue or a key topic?
You're adding it as, you could add it as either a key topic or we put all the key topics and the long-term issues on the long-term issues list in our software, right? Someday maybe we'll actually have a key topics list. Pros and cons, less is more until it's not. So I think it fits fine there.
We have a workaround that makes it work well.
Yeah, I personally just put KT right? And then colon, and then the name of the the title, right? And then I turn that into a 3. The 5s are 1 years, and the 4s are the goals for the next quarter. 3s are the key topics. 2s are issues we're going to talk about, right? And then 1s are things we're not going to worry about during the next quarter.
Just the reservoir of things.
Yeah, right. So, but there's a very specific way of structuring this so that it's easy to get through everything. So, so you can throw KT in front of it, and then when you go to hit the key topic section, you just go into the search in the long-term issues list. This is in 90. Can't help it. I'm sorry. And I just type KT in there, and it just shows all the KTs. And so we work through those right there, and they could become a 3 year, they could become a 1 year, they could become a 90, or we end up calling it a long-term issue that we're not going to worry about during the next 90 days. And even in the title, what I tend to do is I'll put open parenthetical Q letter Q2, right? This is the thing we should tackle in Q2, Q3, Q4, et cetera. So, we obviously have a relatively sophisticated system in our heads for doing all this stuff. But when we come out of the annual at the end of the day 2, you want to feel like, everything is properly organized. And we understand we not only understand the 1 year, we not only understand the next 90 days, but we actually even have a sense for what we're going to want to do in Q2, Q3, right? We're to the point now where we are actively discussing not just the next year, and not just the next 90 days. Those are the easy and obvious things, right? But we're even, this is what we got to worry about in 90 to 180 days. This is what we want to worry about in 180 to 270 days. I think these days we're kind of planning, plus or minus, very serious around the year, very serious around the next 90 days, and a pretty decent understanding of actually, 2 quarters out and 3 quarters out.
I think if you're doing, right, I want to get from here to there,
yeah,
your next 90 days is what's the first step I'm going to take in getting there?
Yeah.
You have a decent sense of what the subsequent steps are.
Yeah.
You probably should if you are able to, but the most important thing is knowing where you have to go and then taking a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then through practice, you'll get better at those subsequent steps.
Yeah. And how do you know how you're doing? So, it's funny. I think about karma a lot. For those of you who watch this stuff a lot, you'll know that. So there's a part of me that hesitates to say this, but we've hit 90% of our rocks for years now, quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. So I think one of the ways you and your senior leadership team are doing reasonably well is you're hitting plus or minus 90%. Now, EOS, right, that coaching organization teaches you should celebrate 80%. And as we've talked about before, 85% is actually if you wanted to be perfect, right? Because you got about 5% failure rate, which is 15%, right? Which is optimal for learning, research says. So, 85, 90%, we're very proud of. We just hit 90 this last quarter. I mean, first time I think we were right at 90%, but we hit 90% of that, and that was 72 rocks. We literally hit 90% of them. And so, how the way you're doing a decent job of planning is, you're hitting your goals and you're hitting 90% of your rocks. Now, the reality is we've been less, just being open about it all, we have been less successful at hitting our goals than we have hitting our rocks. And I'm at peace with that, right?
Do you think that that's a natural, not law is not the right word, but the more likely situation?
No.
Because you have annual goals are basically the compounding of rocks.
I think it's the nature of our business, honestly. It's the nature of our relationships. It's the nature of the marketplace. It's the growth. It's very dynamic, right? And when we miss, it's not that we had a goal that we shouldn't have had. It's just that, shit happens, and we couldn't hit that goal. Now, there've been times when we didn't hit a goal that was it was on me as the leader, right? Because I didn't make darn sure that my direct reports were talking to one another and making sure that they were all on the same page in terms of what it was going to take. So we had one time, as an example, where a very serious, very specific goal for the year was not hit. And, I could blame it on the individual who owned that goal, but then what happened is he blamed it on other people not doing what they needed to do in order for him to hit that goal. And, part of me is like, shame on me. Part of me is like, shame on him.
A little accountability chain there.
Yeah. And so that happened once. You learn.
Yeah. Do you think, so I started this whole thing talking about stage 3, but yeah, doesn't matter.
Right.
Going from, how do you think that this whole process changes, stage 4, stage 5? You're adding in different elements. You have to reconsider certain things aside from how far out you're looking, right? 1 to 5 to 10 years. Obviously, that's a component,
right?
And in terms of the vision aspect of this different stages.
Yeah. So yes, the answer obviously is as the organization evolves, not just in terms of the stages, but what I would say in terms of the core competencies associated with being great in the stage you're in, being great in terms of damn good, if not great, leaders and company builders and scalers, right? First things first is you got to get the senior leadership team to do this stuff well. Second thing is then what you start to cascade down is you need to get your departments to do it well, right? Then ultimately you want to get your teams to do it well. And finally, isn't it amazing if we can have all of our individuals doing this well? As you were talking about earlier with regard to Williamson, and I would love for everybody in this company to have a one year goals, right? And to have the confidence and competence and clarity and comfort, try to get all C's, right? That being really good at making plans and seeing them come to fruition provides.
Yeah, because I think that there are significant second order benefits to everyone really understanding this as a process and appreciating it.
Yeah.
Rather than just being like, oh, here's some boxes I have to check. Because I think a lot of people kind of view it that way. But that's also the nature of how the perspective a lot of people take when it comes to work.
Yeah. Well, obviously, that's the thing we're working on, right? Trying to help people really understand building a company, whether it's a damn good or a great company, where everybody just genuinely loves the work they're doing and cares about the work they're doing and cares about all the ideal stakeholders and cares enough to have hard conversations, cares enough to be kind, not nice, right? And feels like this journey is it's a win-win-win-win-win-win-win, right, for everybody. That's where you want to get to. And we know this is not normal, right? That's part of why I started the company. This is not normal. And it's complicated, yes, or it's hard, I should say, without question. It's not complicated. The things that we need to do to get everybody marching 90 days at a time, understanding why they're doing, where they're going, where it's going to be in 3 years, where it's going to be in 7, 8, 9, 10 years, why we do with the work we do, why our forever agreements exist, respecting our forever agreements, honoring them, living up to, all of our agreements. Ultimately, when you get this working really, really well, you can just, you can do really, really amazing work, and people genuinely love being a part of the organization. This is, like I said, it's not complicated. It is hard. But ultimately, the thing we haven't talked about is after we do all this work, right, then we need to have a state of the company meeting and share all this, right? Share how we did in the last 90 days, share how we did for the year, share if we changed anything that's associated with our vision. Did we modify any of our forever agreements? Did we update our compelling, audacious goals? and then share the new 3 years and explain, right, why we changed things or why we got added things or why we got rid of things, right? And of course, take questions all along the way. Then share the 1 year, right? And then share the 90 days. And then depending upon how sophisticated you are, you may or may not have already begun the work of cascading. Okay, if this is company stuff, here's what the departments have to work on. So in our company, by the time we have the state of the company, actually almost every department and every team will have already seen that information, and talked about, okay, so what do we need to do, right? And so as the organization evolves, you get into stages. There's not just stages of development, but there's basically stages of sophistication, right? And so, as an example, I like to have the departments have 2-year goals, 1-year goals, and of course 90-day. And then I like to have the teams have 1-year goals and 90, and then the individuals just have 90. Now, personally, if they want to take on 1-year goals, I love that, personal goals, right? But ultimately, that's what you want to do, is you want to just get everybody on the same page, understanding where we're all going as a company, where their department's going, where their team's going, and then to feel good about how they participate and where they're going.
So do you have the team specific sessions that come out of the leadership session?
Well, actually, you have the senior leadership team. So at our company, right, we have a C-suite session. Then we have a senior leadership team. So we go from...
Which includes the C-suite.
Which includes the C-suite, right? So we go from a 2-layer, me and my direct reports, to a 3-layer, me, my direct reports, and all their direct reports, right? So we get all on the same page. Then they go away, and each of those departments gets their senior leadership teams together, right? And so that means that the departments and the team leaders are together, right? And that's how we cascade down the goals.
Yes.
And the rocks. Yeah.
But those are more specific on the execution front. And then we have the state of the company thing,
yes,
which is more of a broad, big picture.
Yeah.
What's the context? And then connecting the specific roles and responsibilities there, not from your typical roles and responsibilities, but your roles and responsibilities within the objectives of this piece, this quarter, and how that fits into the rest of the thing.
Yeah.
Do you think it's necessary for companies out there to have both of those pieces?
The planning and the state of the company sharing?
Yeah.
Yes. And I think we've talked about this in prior podcasts. I don't care what generation you're from. We all want to understand what the heck's important, why we're doing the things that we do. I think the millennials and the Gen Zs are more like, this is really super important to me. I want to understand. I want the context. My personality has never liked just do it because I told you to, right? So I think I've been aligned generationally. Yes, thank you.
There's a word.
Yeah, that's a word. Generationally for a long time, but we owe it to everybody so that they get it. And of course, that means that the state of the company includes a genuine amount of time to asking questions. Why didn't we hit this? Why did we change this? Why did we add this? And so it's like, okay. And then, because ultimately you want them to understand how they contribute, how they matter, right, within the company.
In a way, we're bookending this very long process. It's a pretty long process. I mean, let's say, SLT member.
Yeah.
How many days are you in this process of annual planning?
Yeah.
Right. Because you got the C-suite thing.
Yeah.
So there's the setting up everything, SWOT, key topics, day 1 and day 2.
Yeah.
Then taking that and doing it with your team and overseeing the various.
So let's go with me, right, and my direct reports, right, the C-suite. We're in 3 days of annual planning. Our department heads are in 2 days of annual planning, just right, to begin it all. And then they go away, and they typically have anywhere from a half day to a full day with their teams, right? So I'm in 3 days. SLT is typically in 3 days, right? And then you have other people who are typically in a half to 1 day because of the way you cascade it down. And that's excluding the state of the company. And the state of the company on an annual basis is usually a couple hours. So it's
6 days.
It's a real process.
Across the thing is about 6 days, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, nobody's really involved in more than 4.
Yes.
But within those 6 days, you're starting the whole process off with trust, context, getting questions, getting clarification, establishing that context, which is the key topics. Right, it's like there's a little element of uncertainty, and I want that either answered or acknowledged. Sometimes it's just I need something stupid clarified, or it's I want to make sure that this is in the long-term issues, and then we're wrapping it all up with that context repackaged and answering the questions, which is another exercise in trust, because we're sharing a lot of things that are sometimes very sensitive.
Yes.
In the state of the company.
Yep.
And do you think it's essential to have this whole 6 days and all this work be bookended and packaged within the framing and the significance of trust?
Yeah. And by the way, it's even longer than 6 days too, right? Because what'll happen is, especially in the first couple of weeks, people will be like they're talking to one another and say, I can't do all that, right? I got this, you want that. And so
hopefully they're doing that. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. But just to have a sense, I mean, it's a couple week process, and it just is what it is. And you can try not to have it, but it's slow as smooth as fast. If you do this really, really well, you're going to end up, my experience as a coach suggests, that you're going to end up, that year is going to be so much more efficient, and the progress is going to be real and positive, right? I saw something posted the other day by an EOS coach, and he was really happy that his client rated, I think, was either the year or a quarter an A, and it was one of the first times after many, many, many sessions he's had that. I, once again, don't mean to be the karma guy, right? But my clients are consistently hitting A's and A minuses every quarter, every year, because they're disciplined.
You say karma, but it's basically it's a little bit of sacrificing the present for the future.
Yes.
Because it's like we're giving up 2 weeks. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be intense. We're going to have hard conversations.
Yes.
But that's crucial to having a successful year.
Yeah.
And on the coaching end, it's important that you have this very well understood as a practice, and you have experience here. You have that wisdom that you can bring into into the companies you're coaching.
Right.
And we talked about the ripple effects of that. So when you are in a coaching situation and you have a client or a company that is new to this, and maybe tends to be a little bit more volatile,
right,
less disciplined, in this whole thing, you're like, oh, we'll figure it out. We always figure it out,
right?
And it's like, okay, well, you're growing,
right?
That's not always going to work, and I'm sure there is a desire to sort of go off the path a little bit, because you think that this is the right thing to do in this moment. How do you handle that pushback or variance within companies?
Obviously, I can speak best for me, right? So a couple of things. First of all, you hired me because you were in pain, right? You hired me because I've been here and done this. You've hired me because you checked my references, and I've helped, tens and tens of people go from pain to significant gain, right? I mean, helped a company go from no revenues to over 100 million and 10% EBITDA in like 4 years, kind of a thing. Help people hit billion-dollar valuations, right? You brought me into your world because you trusted my experience and the system, right, and my capabilities. And so, guys, right, trust me on this one. I know what I'm doing. You don't need to be, it's like the conversations we've had or I've talked about before, right? It's not complicated. It's hard. But you don't need to be creating your own tools. You don't need to be creating new disciplines. You don't need to be creating frameworks, right? Focus on doing the things that you need to do to build high trust relationships with all of your customers so that they love you and they have your back and they help you when you get hit in the face, because you're going to get hit in the face. Can we just focus on, right? Can we focus on taking advantage of everything we know as opposed to trying to create new things, right? And when those moments do happen, right? This is where I get what, let's just say it's the founder. I'm like, right, doing this to them and everybody else is watching this, and I'm like, Joe, right? No. Right? We know this stuff. We've proven this stuff. I'm open. I don't want to tell you what to do. You've got to figure out, you got to embrace this for yourself. Right? Is this really the best thing for you to do? Or is trusting the process, trusting the tools, trusting the frameworks, right? Can we just get back onto that because they work, right? And so, every now and then you will have those conversations. But as time progresses, they just it becomes, no, I trust you. No, I trust you. No, I trust you. And all of a sudden, there'll be moments where you're like, hey, let's remember, right? But for the most part, you're that, I want to think about like the Karate Kid, right? At some point you've got to give
Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, you've got to you have to trust.
Yeah,
right.
And the trust in that case is you've proven the competency.
Yes,
right. You have the character. We know that from the reviews and the connections because you're there.
Yeah, yeah.
But the competency part can be in doubt because you haven't proved that tangibly to the client.
Yeah. And so, sometimes, if I think about new clients as an example, sometimes it will take me quarters on end to get them. They like intellectually, but don't emotionally, right? Sort of trust me and or the process. So it takes, it'll take some quarters. Sometimes, right, it's just like boom, 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 boom. It's like, no, we're going to do that. 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 And they embrace it, right? Completely. And they're like, zoom, off to the races, right? So I've had some clients get their entire company up, running, aligned, from the very top all the way down to the fresh new face, right? They're marching and they're 90% strong across the 9 core competencies within 15 months. Sometimes it takes, I hear, coaches to get up to, 3+ years before you get this whole thing. And we know we have lots of clients who've never, right? The majority of our clients, right? I don't mean to be down on our coaches, right? We love them, but the majority of our clients still haven't cascaded the operating system all the way down and throughout. Until you do that, you don't have the magic of it all, right? But once you do that and you get everybody on the same page from the top to the fresh new face in the individual contributor level, it's just so much easier to just hit those numbers and feel like you're making progress every single quarter.
When you have the whole thing cascaded, your lever is just way more effective.
Right? It's unbelievable, right?
I think when you say it's not complicated, it's just hard.
Yes.
I think all the things that have been built and the things we've learned, they're very complicated, but obviously we, in doing that work, are standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
And then we're setting things up so people can stand on our shoulders.
Yeah.
And so we're doing the burden of synthesizing and distilling all the things that are very complicated. And ideally we're doing that from principle, which is slow and difficult, but robust and helpful for our understanding and also helpful for everyone else in creating things that last. But once we give those tools, those concept tools, disciplines, content to people and just have to execute, then it's not complicated. It's just hard.
Right.
And when you do it long enough, and you submit to that. It's not probably not the right word, submit, but you're open to that whole process.
Give over to.
Yeah. Open up to it.
Yeah.
And let it do its work.
Yes.
That's where the magic is.
Yeah.
And it is still hard. And it's hard because you have to do things. And it's hard because it's going to probably reveal some insecurities because you haven't been doing things as well as you thought you were.
Right.
Which is a good thing, right? That means you're learning and you're growing. But it is uncomfortable. So when you are with a client or you're looking at your clients, whether yours or others in the community of coaches, what is the general difference in success of those who are very accepting, very much like, here's a good plan, or here's the plan, let's run with it, according to the coaches, versus those who are more disagreeable and hesitant to just take that leap of faith and really jump into it?
There's no single answer, obviously, right? So, part of it is, why are things still hard and complicated, right? Why do you feel stuck, right? Why do you not feel like you're getting, quote unquote, right, the traction that feels like you should have by now, right? And so, sometimes it's, you got a crazy visionary who just can't help themselves and they're constantly throwing, we call them non-rock rocks in the middle of a quarter, as an example. Sometimes it's, there's just so much change going on in the industry. And so there's a lot of insecurity in terms of just like the company's reason for being.
And it's more of a uncertainty, and anxiety, if you had to put an emotion behind it.
Yeah, right. And so there's freeze brain going on, right? So sometimes you have that going on. Sometimes you have a leader who is, for a whole host of reasons, which we're all guilty of, has yet to really surround themselves with a great leadership team, right? They're afraid to let someone go. They're afraid to have a hard conversation. They've got, they've got a very, it's like they've got a vehicle that has lots of issues with it still. And, maybe it's bad tires, maybe it's a, bad, transmission. It's just, there's some fundamental things that got to be addressed, right? Maybe, what the work they've done isn't great. Right. Maybe, they're still scale R's, right? They're still trying to figure stuff out. So they're still mucking around with their ICP. They're still mucking around with their compelling value proposition. They still don't have a compelling why that everybody believes in. They're still, their culture. They don't walk the talk, right? There's just so many things that can potentially get into creating, making it harder than it needs to be. And that's why, I deeply believe that whether you use our 9 core competencies assessment or you use EOS's org checkup, getting on the same page in terms of what's working, what's not working, in terms of your fundamentals, right? Your fundamental tools and your fundamental disciplines. I deeply believe you got to look at that every single quarter, right? And we didn't talk about it in the annual, but part of the annual is to stand back and say, hey, where are we in terms of, the strength of our 9 core competencies? Is part of the reason we're struggling still because our process competency is still really weak? Is it, because our vision has weakness? We're collectively giving our vision, a 7 out of 10 because we're not on the same page, right? We don't believe we have a compelling value proposition. We don't believe our ICP is clear, right? We don't believe we're genuinely walking the talk around our compelling why. There's a whole host of things, right? But with the right tools and the right, including the assessments, you can see what's working and what's not working, and therefore you're better positioned to focus on what our priorities should be for the next 90 days or the next year or next 3 years.
Is there anything else you would like to add? You're talking about the 9 core competencies as a component and reflecting on that. Is there anything that you want to dive into?
No, I think I do think that I didn't talk about in the agenda. I should have brought that up as part of day one agenda, is to assess where you are in terms of the 9 core competencies, or the org checkup if you're running on EOS, or some other assessment if you're running on some other business operating system.
Where would that slot in?
I would do it after. It's interesting, right? I think you could throw it in before the trust exercise session, or you could throw it in after, but before the SWOT. There's pros and cons. I think that oftentimes when we go through the assessment, you can see disagreements in the room, and so having evidence of disagreements before you go and do the trust work is actually reinforces the need for the trust work. So I'd probably put it in front of the trust work.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Annual planning.
Annual planning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.